Today we're taking a look at my experience with the Harbin. And I'm not gonna lie, it's been rough. This ship has been a massive challenge to get through. And honestly, I can't remember grinding through a tier 8 that was really this bad in a very long time. Usually, tier 8s happen to be a decent part of most grinding experiences, since you're forced to play against tier 10s for the first time. And that's often going to be a massive power spike in the grinding progression. While the Harbin actually does get a lot of improvements over the Chumphon, it's not great. This thing really lacks range. The spin to win mechanic starts to show up here, where we get a lot of torpedoes to dump. That is a soupy mess that I've left for these poor battleships. And when people do push into me, I've actually had a great time. This ship does finally get some decent shell arcs. You have some Russian guns here. I think they're off of the Kiev, a tier 8 destroyer, and they do pretty good work. The DPM really is nothing special though, and honestly, I found the damage output to be a little bit lacking again. I think this line really does require the use and hitting of these torpedoes to really have a good game. You're going to notice most of my best games in this video happen when I actually am hitting my torpedoes, or I just happen to get an enemy team that wants to push in, and I have spotting from my teammates that allows me to farm very efficiently. But these torpedoes, of course, are a really great tool for dealing with people pushing in. They're quite difficult to spot since they're deep waters, so there's basically no reaction time unless you have hydroacoustic or someone is spotting them for you. But in this first game, not a bad result, nearly up to 100k. But I gotta be honest, most of my results looked like this. I'm not gonna show all of them because that would be a boring, pretty sad video, but most of them look like this, where we're partway through a game, we've lost most of our team, and the game is essentially over. We're getting run down at this point, and this ship really does struggle in these kind of scenarios. When it's forced to constantly be on the move, it's difficult to make use of the smokescreen. And of course, the big issue with the Pan-Asian cruisers, of course, is no spotting. You can't spot for yourself when you're in a smokescreen. So that was a waste of an entire smoke there. Didn't really get much done until the carrier came over and spotted that destroyer. At close range, sure, it's pretty good against DDs, so I did manage to kill him. But here, we're just gonna lose our ship because we're caught in the open. This ship does not have very good armor at all, and it's got very low HP. And that's pretty standard for a light cruiser, I would say. But for one with such low range and inability to impact the game on a larger scale, like with radar, for example, around a cap, makes it very difficult to win games and really change the outcome of a match. I also found that I get outgunned by a Mogador. Quite dramatically, actually. I will admit my aim wasn't the best against this guy, but you'll notice the dispersion often does land shells all over the place. It's not the best dispersion in the world on this ship. The Mogador has time to turn, fight a Jutland the entire time I'm shooting at him, and turn around and actually he'll end up killing me here, even though we're similar on HP. To be fair though, a Mogador does have some pretty impressive damage saturation, so my shells are doing progressively less damage as he gets lower in HP, and Mogadors and French destroyers are notoriously difficult to hit. So he's a tier higher and in a much better ship, but it is a little bit disheartening when I lose a gunfight that badly to a destroyer in a light cruiser. And we'll see later on how I actually end up dying outright to destroyers rushing me. Not like this though. Apollo Emilio, well, that's a torpedo threat. So the maneuverability, of course, is a bit of a weakness here. The turning radius can be decent, and the acceleration is just kind of mediocre. You really have to consider the position you're taking in a smokescreen. There's no hydro here, so taking a smokescreen and sitting flat broadside to where a destroyer will likely come from is a massive risk. This thing does not slow down very quickly, and it doesn't accelerate very quickly either. I do have propulsion mod in this case, and that is why I have okay acceleration. Of course, we're not quite able to stop in time for this follow, and we end up dying for it. Unfortunate, but it was Apollo Amelia of yellow. He was doing the right thing by sitting there and just spotting me in that smoke. So I had to do something, otherwise I would have just died to his team. And again, this ship just seems to have low battle impact. I've had a very tough time with having big, impactful games where I feel like I actually contributed to the outcome of the match. Notice the timer here. It's a minute 40 left in this game, and I've barely done over 20,000 damage. And this is a tier 10 game, so there's no lack of HP here. There were plenty of battleships. I just didn't have the opportunity because the enemy team decided to play outside of 13.5 kilometers of range, which isn't even to say they played extremely passive either. It's just to say that only 13.5 kilometers of range is extremely difficult to make use of in these tier 10 games, since a lot of these maps are so wide open and there's a lot of room to play around with 15 to 20 kilometers of range, that kind of thing. So I do run away and accept the victory in this case, but yeah, 30,000 damage, that's really rough for a ship that I'm trying to grind through. At the end of the day, I'm really trying to get to the tier 10. I'm trying to get through the Harbin. I don't want to just play it for fun, essentially. I'm trying to get my way through this line. And these extremely low damage, low impact games really make the grind take much longer than it otherwise could have with a better ship. So with these kind of experiences in mind, I decide to play much more aggressive in my next match. And this is what happens. I end up actually running into a bunch of very aggressive destroyers. So there's no worry about our experience after this game, since we're doing a ton of damage to the DDs. And since I'm so aggressive, playing next to this island here, and there's a carrier in the game spotting, I also have a DD playing right and around me as well, we're going to do a great job of just farming out the Charnors, perhaps also taking a look at the Dutch cruiser there, whatever the tier 8 one is called. I'm actually forgetting it at the moment. Harlem, yeah, it's a Harlem. Yeah, it's a decent ship in these kind of positions. You'll notice a lot of shatters since we do have a low caliber gun, and the amount of damage is just okay. I don't think the Harbin has especially impressive DPM. I've been noticing through this line that it almost feels like they wanted to create an Austin, the steel ship at tier 10. They wanted to create an entire line based off that, but a little bit different. So the tier 10 is basically an Austin with worse arcs, better base reload, no reload booster, but you get a smoke, which is pretty cool, and these deep water spin to win type torps. And I think that one is shaping up to be a pretty good ship. I'm not quite there yet. I'm on the tier 9 still. But then with the tier 9, they massively nerfed the DPM. Instead of a 3.5 second reload, the tier 9 gets a 5.5 second reload. And as we work our way down the tiers, we just start losing a lot of what makes the tier 10 powerful. And it really does come down to the DPM and the range. I've been playing the tier 9 with range mod, and it's been much more comfortable. But this 13.5 kilometers is really, really tough to make use of in today's kind of games. So be prepared for that with the Harbin. I really struggled to get in range in this ship most of the time. It's really unfortunate that this happens at tier 8. I am much more forgiving of bad ships earlier on in the grind, since even at tier 7, it doesn't take too long to reach the tier 8 from an XP perspective. But as we reach tier 8, grinding towards that tier 9, it becomes exponentially harder and requires much more experience to actually unlock that next tier. And then of course from tier 9 to 10 is another jump in the amount of XP. So these ships should be good for their tier. They should be a decent representation and experience of what the eventual tier 10 is going to look like. It shouldn't be a ship that is incredibly frustrating to play and lacks actually a lot of the qualities of the higher tier ships. So I'm really disappointed, I guess, in the Harbin. I was hoping it would be a big improvement over the Chumphon. As many of you know, I wasn't a huge fan of that ship either. So I think at this point, this line is shaping up to be a bit of a top-heavy one, where The tier 10 is a decent prize. I've seen some pretty hilarious clips from some of my friends with the insane amount of torpedoes that it spits out, and of course the DPM being much better. I think that it's just a little bit disappointing that as you're working your way up to some of these ships, the grind is just a bit of a slog. It's hard to get through. It's frustrating. And if there's a bit of a cynical side of me, I would have to guess that maybe Wargaming wants it that way to make it more incentive and a little bit more interesting to spend some doubloons on some free experience and purchase your way through a little bit. But I don't think that's necessarily completely the case, but there is a bit of an incentive to make these lines harder to grind, since there are ways of paying your way through to get through them, which is unfortunate. There's incentive for the developer to make the game a little bit more frustrating and difficult to play. Although, all of this said, I'm very happy this line is not OP, okay? I've been very hard on the Harbin and the Chumphon so far. I have not liked these ships very much at all, but as someone who plays, well, other ships, I'm very glad this is not a line of Smolensks, let's say. This could have been a massive blow to the metagame and something that made the game incredibly passive and very, very difficult to even consider pushing in at all. While these ships, I do believe, still make the game much more passive than they otherwise would have, since they are very, very strong when people are pushing in, and you get to do those spin-to-win torpedoes and, well, use the HE to really effectively farm someone who's pushing in. I'm very glad that they're not so overbearing that I can't push in ever again. So this was one of my best games in Harbin, actually, and 130k, but again, landing in a defeat. I just feel like there's not much battle impact here other than damage output, and it's short range, very, very situational damage output. So with that result coming in, I felt like I had kind of understood what the Harbin needed. It needs a very aggressive playstyle, going towards some of the more interesting, difficult to play aggressive islands. And unfortunately, I end up eating a bunch of torpedoes in this one. Well, actually, I'm going to eat 2 torpedoes, and that is going to leave me on a sliver of HP. Notice here that our DPM is not amazing into the Fletcher as well, so the ability to kill destroyers quickly is really not something this line does particularly well, at least at these mid-tiers, I would say. So now that we're on a flood, use my damage con too soon. I certainly should have expected the other set of torps. I was hoping I was going to be able to dodge them. So we're on low HP, well, trying to bow tank a Petro who was radaring us. This is a very tough position to be in. I found that this line, this ship, I should say, Harbin, requires very aggressive play. But that aggressive play is punished very heavily by most of the heavy cruisers and battleships at the tier, even the destroyers. And don't worry, we're getting to the point where I get rushed down by destroyers and killed, which is just pathetic. But it did happen to me, so something you should be aware of, that getting rushed by DDs is a little bit scary. Trying out the AP, if people do give you broadside, it is very much worth going after. But I do manage to survive a little bit longer in this one. In fact, I do manage to reverse out of this situation. I'm not even being spotted once that smoke goes away. But that was basically the end of my game, since if I was spotted again, almost anybody could kill me. So moving on to the next game, where I get into a very strong position, very central on the map, trying to get in a position to farm things out. All I need is spotting. That is the problem. I need spotting. And without spotting, I don't know what's coming. And of course, there's torpedoes on the way. Very smart play by the destroyer. I was not expecting the DD to be quite that aggressive. And I was really hoping my carrier would spot a little bit for me here. Maybe the battleship at least, if not the DD that was capping. And unfortunately, I died. Moving on. This game resulted in me dying again for being too aggressive. A bit of a theme, right? I need to play aggressive to make this ship work. I need to be in range of these guns. You'll notice that my battleships, even my destroyer, are actually behind me here. I get myself into a bad position trying to play this island in the early game. You'll notice about 7 minutes have gone by in this match so far. Trying to play this island, trying to, well, farm these battleships that are coming through. And I was thinking this game could result in a decent outcome. But since my team is pretty far behind me here, and, well, we don't have a lot of spotting, it's going to be a huge problem for me. I am kind of left out to dry here. And unfortunately, I can't actually disengage from positions like this. I need to be playing in these close island-heavy positions to just even attempt to make use of my ship. And you'll notice I get spotted from shooting. And look at that. A Harbin on the enemy team has pushed up to proxy spot me after shooting. Then, of course, the Alaska takes me out. This is a massive issue with this ship specifically. There's so little range on this ship that I feel like I need to play this aggressively just to even be in range to use my guns. Otherwise, I'm just sitting there doing nothing like some of those earlier matches you saw. Notice I was also spotted well in my smoke screen after shooting in this game, so I know there's a DD coming up behind me. I actually know there's 2 destroyers coming up behind me. And yes, I have hyped it up. I am going to be rushed down by destroyers here. It's going to take a little bit, but notice we're on 26,000 HP. And that should be more than enough to take on these deities, right? Well, here we go. Z31, perhaps the worst destroyer at tier 7. Is, well, he's going to smoke up, and unfortunately, I have to give ground since there's a battleship coming through. I think I'll just be able to blind fire him without issues and take him out. Since light cruiser, lots of DPM, should be able to take some blind fire and take out, well, one of the worst ships at tier 7, right? Well, no, there's actually a DD from behind me that's actually taking a big chunk out of my HP pool. Yes, we're already down to 12,000 HP. And this is mainly coming in from other destroyers. You'll notice the enemy cruisers are pretty far away. The battleships have been whiffing their shots. And yeah, the carrier's coming in as well. I haven't talked about it, but the AA is actually quite dreadful on this ship. Unless you manage to land a huge flat cloud like that with defensive fire up, I've been dropped quite often in this ship, even from tier 6 carriers. So trying to take out at least one of these destroyers. Unfortunately, he manages to go dark. This is a big issue. I lack spotting. My carriers focus somewhere else, and of course, I can't expect a CV to constantly be babysitting me and giving me spotting. It's just difficult when I'm trying to play in positions where the fight should be, where our team should be focusing, like for example, the B cap that the enemy team is trying to take control of. On 3,000 HP now, you notice I've been angled as much as possible to the Z31 since he's using armor piercing against me. And a blind fire at the very end there puts me down to 1,000 HP. And yeah, still haven't managed to deal with either of these destroyers. And funnily enough, I push out because, again, I wasn't really getting much spotting help. I was kind of asking for it. I only managed to put this Z31 on 6,000 HP. After all that, and now, of course, I only get a couple salvos in before the Z31 takes me out. So I was pretty disappointed there, and just you wait for the tier 9. This may happen again. As for the commander, I'm still using the same one as I was on the Chumphon. It is a concealment focused, and of course, maximizing our ability to stay alive, essentially, is what I'm trying to do here. So Superintendent, as well as improved survivability expert, and of course, adrenaline rush. I do wish I had taken heavy HE instead of the fill the tubes, but as you can see on level 20, I'm nearly there. At 21 points, I'm definitely going to be taking heavy HE, since it's a free upgrade on these ships, because the detectability penalty only applies to ships with a gun caliber of above 149 millimeters. So it's basically a free 10% damage buff. But I'm also using Demolition Expert as well as Swift Fish, trying to make use of the torpedoes on this thing, as well as the essentially burn everything down style of guns. And on the tier 9 here, I have been actually having a better time, but the tier 8, man, I had a rough experience. So let me know how, if you guys have been playing Harbin, how it went. But My grind was awful, I gotta say. So if you're playing Harbin, ignore this slot. You won't have it quite yet. But I was running concealment, propulsion, as well as aiming systems. You notice the dispersion wasn't great, even with aiming systems on the Harbin. Engine room protection, since you have very little armor. It's very easy to get your engine or rudder knocked out. And then, of course, main armaments mod. Yeah, that's the build I was running. I had a tough time. But hopefully this tier 9 goes a little bit better for you guys, as I've had a decent time with this thing. But yeah, the Harbin, not a great ship. And unfortunately, is one of the tougher points of the grind. Since tier 8, you start to see those tier 10s again. But yeah, thanks for watching the video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day.